Top of the morning to you. Gonna show you a little trick here. I was working on this DIN rail power supply, and I replaced this cap. Well, actually I replaced this cap with this one. And I plugged it in and the thing promptly went up in flames, which is not unsurprising. It probably had other issues. I don't know if you can see it down in there. Yeah. This is quite spectacular. It kind of looked like some 4th of July firework. So anyway, it's a loss. I'm not gonna, yeah, there's a huge, right there, ooh. Huge burn spot there. Although it's not a real loss. Hang on a second, well, there's a lot of wind today. Oh, let's see if we can get you straightened up here. I'll be back in a second. What I've got here is a little propane torch and a 1 pound propane bottle. I kind of like these a little bit better. These bottles a little bit better than the tall ones. They tend to stand up and not roll around so much. And if you do any electronic repair, the parts off of these type of stuff are always welcome. There's a fuse, perfectly good probably. Amazing it probably didn't blow. Let's find out real quick. And the fuse is... no, it did blow. Okay. Well, the fuse is no good. Into the bin. So, but the fuse holder, there's a lot of usable parts in there still. There'd be some stuff that'd be fun to play with, but sitting there, unless you need to practice, and picking that stuff off of there, it's not going to be any fun. So let me show you how I get stuff off. So all you got to do is just start heating that. You could use a heat gun to do the same thing if it was a pretty aggressive heat gun. Now you really want to do this outside because those boards stink. But you can see here, I've already got quite a bit of stuff to come raining off of there. Well, let's just, I always start in a corner and just work my way around. You're going to have a little solder. It isn't pretty, and it smells bad. But, and be careful, the boards do get hot. It surprisingly works well. And I don't know, we spent, what, maybe a couple minutes, and I harvested all those parts. And I would venture to say, there's like a little LED, that 99% of that stuff is good. Most of the time, the stuff I find on there's still some stuff on this little subboard, like those big connectors might be nice to have. There's a switch and stuff. I'd venture to say that 99% of this stuff is usable. Like there's some small the surface mount stuff's going to be a little tough because a lot of times they put a little drop of glue before they place the component, and there may be some solder stuck to some of these, and they may be a little black. But you might be surprised how well some of that stuff might turn out. Now granted, I don't know if I'd reuse a capacitor without testing it, but if you have a really good cap checker. Now here's a little choke or a little filter that might be fun to play with. There's a cap. There's some little inductors, and these are probably all MOVs. Yeah. There's a bridge rectifier that was a couple dollars, and there's a little potentiometer. There's the bad cap I took out of here. Actually, I kind of like the heat gun better. It since the flame, you kind of toast things a little bit, and you can see that board is a wreck. There it is. But there's still a lot of parts on there. There's still some big heat sinks. This was probably a chopper power supply. There's a little bit of, actually there's always a little bit of solder on there too, and amazingly enough, I always pour that off into a bucket, and over the years I've obtained quite a bit. There's some surface mount things to play with. Another good way to get the surface mount stuff off there is to get a kind of a stiff bristle brush, and after you get it all heated up, is to just wipe it across there real quick. Yeah, there's still a few things in there. Some of these caps were glued in, and they came loose anyway. Now this doesn't work so good if the manufacturer crimped the if they crimp the edges of the wires over. It doesn't work so good, but it does kind of work if you bang on it hard enough. A lot of times the solder will fly off and just leave the components kind of hanging there, and then you can go back later with the needle nose and pick them off at your pleasure. I don't know, it's quick and dirty. You know, there's, like I said, there's a little nice little LED there, and there's some diodes. Well, there was some diodes that I dropped. Oh, no, that's actually a resistor. There's a few little resistors. There's some diodes. Those are probably high-speed switching diodes for this. Let's just find out if they're any good. This should beep, I assume, one way. That's blocked that way, and yeah, that one's good. There's the transistor. That's a 2N2222, pretty generic transistor. There is some sort of an IC, a UC3845, probably a frequency modulated output IC. So, I don't know, there you go. Got the same IC, or is that a different one? That's the same one. Yeah, I don't know, if you don't have a lot of money to spend, you're just getting started or want to fiddle with electronics, this might be a good way to get a few parts. I've been doing this for years. Hasn't affected me yet. Anyway. So, there's some surface mount stuff in there. There's a little surface mount transistor. It's kind of like mining for, or panning for gold. And there's some little switching diodes. It's a really small diode. I wonder what that is. It's a, I don't know. There's actually quite a few diodes in this thing. Little potentiometer, I think I mentioned that. It looks like it's, I don't know, maybe a... Oh, we can always measure it, I suppose, if I just had to. Oh, it's 1K. These are little MOVs, I bet. I think I mentioned that too. That one must have been near the point of impact. If anything, it'd be fun to look those things up. There's another little safety cap. 10 nanofarad at 250 volt. And that's a... Oh, I suppose we could test that bridge rectifier. I don't know, it looks pretty good. Yeah. Looks like a winner. There's some miscellaneous hardware in there. I still got a little bit to harvest off there. There's some other stuff here. Actually, a few small surface mount resistors. There's a few that kind of got chained together. Yeah, I think that one's a dud, but that one might be usable. That one might be fun to play with. We're making a tiny little project. And needed a resistor, or you know what I really use this stuff on is I use this for prototyping quite a bit. I usually check it, and then you know if the prototype doesn't work out, you're not out a lot. The other thing is sometimes you need to repair something, you know, like if you need a safety cap, or you know these are pretty good size. These are Rubicon caps, and they're not all bulgy. They might be okay. There's, you know, what is there? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 caps in there. Even if one of them was good, that's $1 or $2, and it didn't cost you that much to. There's some iron in there too. There's a couple of interesting chokes. That one might be a bear to get out. That's actually like a choke. But I would, you know, it would probably be easier to cut that out and then just kind of desolder it. This little switching power supply transformer, and there's a couple of, there's a heavy-duty diode over here. Tell you what, some of those heavier things, if you, sometimes you can mount this in a vise, you know, and use pliers to pull this stuff out. I'm going to use this pair of needle nose to kind of see if I can pop that out. That didn't take more than a second or two. Actually, that diode is probably good. It has some little ferrite beads on it. That's probably a switching diode, or a high-speed switching diode. Let's see if it's still any good. Yeah. Perfectly fine. What was that, like 10 seconds to get that out? It could be a pretty heavy-duty part. See if there's anything else on there. There's a few interesting ICs and stuff on there. There's another diode. There's probably some opto isolators. There's actually quite a few diodes. I don't know what that is. That's a interesting little transistor. So I don't know what. Time me here. Ready, go. Took a little longer actually. The play-through hole tore through that. Surprisingly, I mean, I just tore that transistor out of there, and it's warm but not hot. I don't know if that's a voltage regulator or it has some glue on it, which I'm trying to scrape off. I don't know. Looks like a transistor. Let's just check it real quick. Looks like it might be good. Yep. Wait a minute, there actually is. The glue is kind of cooled off a little bit, or crumbling off of there. I mean, you have to look the rating up. But like I said, if you're just fiddling, yep, it's good. So there was probably a $1 transistor you could use in a little project. You know, if you just needed a little switching transistor for a relay. There actually was a relay in there too. I don't know how well that would come out. This daughter board is the board's starting to get pretty crumbly. There's a few components on there. Actually, there's an op amp. Looks like an LM358. There's some pretty heavy connectorizations if you were making a little circuit board. Maybe try and burn that off of there real quick. Boards get pretty rubbery when they get heat on them. There, it just flew off of there. It's a nice little connector for something. 6 poles. Mounted on a little proto circuit board. There's another one up there. A few of the components flew off of there. There was a little metal jumper. There's a ferrite bead. There's a bunch of cool stuff on there. There's plenty of old circuit boards to be had. Don't be afraid to pry into an old TV. There's a lot of interesting high voltage stuff there. Some interesting, you know, older TVs have more interesting stuff than the newer TVs. Newer TVs, it's so much integration that there's barely anything on them. But it's still worth, you know, you might find a few components. Like I said, I got a handful of good stuff there. You can always get some of your friends, get a bunch of torches, and some circuit boards. You know, who knows, comedy may ensue. Try not to burn each other. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to leave them. Take her easy. Have a good day. Top of the morning to you. Earlier today I was showing you how to harvest some components off of circuit boards relatively quickly. Just for fun, I picked out some of the more interesting ones, and yeah, you probably can't see that real well, but that's okay. That's actually a little pulse width modulated amplifier. It's probably used for switching power supplies. Actually, the data sheet was a little bit unspecific, but there were a number of data sheets, so I'm not too worried about that. That probably works just fine. There's a little bridge rectifier. It's rated at 600 volts at 4 amps, which is great little power supply. And this diode is a step recovery diode. It's rated at an 1.5 amps at 600 volts. And I believe it was a fast recovery diode. It being in that power supply, that makes sense. So there's some pretty good little trinkets there to get a hold of. You know, I had to order that stuff and pay for it. Oh, I don't know, that IC might be $1 or $2, that might be 50 cents. There might be, you know, between, depending on where you order, there might be between $1 and $5 worth of stuff there. But the point I'm trying to make is, you may have to buy it, you know, have some minimum order, and B, you're gonna have to wait for it, you know, unless you spend more money to get it overnighted to you. You know, if you're just jacking around, this might, you know, you're not gonna find that up at Radio Shack or the step recovery diode. Probably not. You might find a bridge rectifier up there. They've got such limited parts anymore. It's kind of sad. You know, when I was younger, in my youth, they used to have a lot of parts. Now everything's online and you got to order it. Granted, I believe it'll be delivered to the store. Still won't charge you shipping, but it's still a pain. You know, if you're like me, I'm usually fiddling with stuff at 2 in the morning, and I, you know, really need the all-night electronics place. So there you go. There's a little, I don't know, little silver in that cloud potentially. Yeah, I blew the power supply up. It wasn't anything critical. I bought a number of these power supplies to play with at a flea market. 4 of them work. This one didn't, but it yielded some fun toys out of it, and I got to learn something. That's one of the fun things about doing that, is you might learn something, you might stumble across some technology you're unfamiliar with. You know, I don't think I'd ever seen an IC like that before. Kind of interesting. I might try and prototype something out of it and see if I can get it to work. Interestingly enough, 90% of the stuff that I find on these boards works, and the few either are so charred because I wasn't careful, or one of my other theory is that the stuff is just bad to begin with, and that was probably the component that really failed, and I was too stupid to figure it out. Like I said, this board went up in flames when I tried to repair it, so instead of messing around, I just called it a loss. There's still a lot of good stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. Like I said, there's an op amp and a transistor. Interestingly enough, the circuit I seen, the kind of the I don't know, test circuit or demo circuit I seen for this IC. Oh, it'd probably help if I zoomed out for you folks. The demo circuit I seen for this IC, interestingly enough, had a lot of capacitors and a lot of components that I found in the box. So I got a feeling that this circuit is almost verbatim right out of the data sheet. So there's still a lot of useful things there. There's some MOVs, and I don't know if that's a safety cap or hard to say. There's a couple big caps. There's a little line filter. There's a couple of fuse holders there. There's a handful of stuff. This thing actually had a lot of safety or surge suppressor equipment built into it, which is kind of nice. Probably explains why these modules were a couple $100 new. They're useless junk now. MOV, why that didn't come out. Oh, it's just on the edge of coming out. I don't know. Let's see if we can burn that out of there just for fun. But it stink. So there's a little MOV. That's probably just fine. You'd be surprised how really tough that stuff is. I mean, it can take some heat as long as it isn't continuous. If you get the board too hot, you're worried about it, just set it off to the side and work on another board and go back and forth. I do that all the time. Anyway, Thanks for watching, and take her easy.